Hello, welcome to Urban Ink Spot. My name is Janine, and today I want to talk about flying with fountain pens. Now, I've often heard people say that it's not a good idea to fly with fountain pens because it can get a little bit tricky and there are some things you really need to worry about. But I've just wrapped up some airline travel in June, July, August, and I've got another flight coming up in September. And fortunately for me, so far with a little bit of pre-planning, my fountain pens have been looking after me and not the other way around. So what I want to do today is talk a little bit about what it's been like for me to fly with fountain pens, at least from my perspective. And we can cover what I'm thinking about, what I'm not really worrying about, some myths that I've found to be somewhat untrue, and then a little bit more about what might make sense when you're on the move. So here's the truth. Every time I pack my pens, I imagine myself journaling on the plane, writing postcards in the terminal, filling page after page at my destination, and that's not really what happens. Sometimes, as in this last trip I took, I had 2 pens with me, but I didn't even touch them until I got back into the airport on the way home. And sometimes I don't even touch them until I get all the way back home again, and that's okay. The big lesson I've learned is to keep my expectations more tempered to what's realistic and what's going to happen, and then just to put a few steps, a few things in place so that I'm not worrying about them. Because what I've found is that travel writing is different. And as much as I love them, I don't have the luxury of slow drying inks when I'm scribbling in a cafe or if I'm jotting something down before boarding. And while I do try to have blotting paper on hand in the event I need it, that's not always the case. And that's when water resistant or fast drying inks or even just a finer nib size would really shine. And my favorite trick is having a custom grind on a small vac filler that gives me a cursive italic on one side and a broad on the other. And if I do choose to pair another pen with it, then I have at a minimum line variation for 2 different nib grinds and maybe even a third. So I get that line variation when I want it, but I can also keep it practical whenever time is tight. So how many pens should you actually travel with? Well, I would say 1 pen, technically enough. 2 pens feels a little more balanced and is a little more realistic on how I like to travel, which would mean you have a workhorse pen and also something that has some flair. And beyond that, you might start drifting into, oh my goodness, I need to take my whole pen collection, or that overpacking territory. So I've found that my happy place is 2 vac fillers, one with a medium nib and one with that custom grind that I was just talking about. So that's been enough to give me variety and a backup a little bit and some peace of mind. Because here's the thing. Being a fountain pen person doesn't mean you need to be fountain pen all the time, because your overstuffed pen roll might scream it, but it doesn't always really make sense for the trip. And I've been on some work trips, like I said, where I only needed a quick note taker. And I've also spent some time at my brother's kitchen table where I was sharing my pens with the family. We were all kind of grabbing them, playing, writing, and journaling might have fit in between those conversations, or when I was hanging out by myself a later time. And in those moments, all of those moments collectively, for me, 2 pens have been plenty. Now, as I was saying, I have 2 pens that I typically travel with, which means my kit is not expensive. My pricier pens are actually home bodies, and they stay safe at home where I can enjoy them when I'm back at home, but without worrying about turbulence or hotel desks or misplacing them. So, not super expensive pens. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't travel with a luxury pen if you want to. But for me, at this stage of my pen journey, it's really about practicality. And vac fillers are durable, they hold a lot of ink, and they're very versatile on how I'm going to be using them when I'm out and about and on the go. And it's freeing to travel without that little voice in the back of my mind worrying about a scratch or even a cap rolling under the airplane seat, which of course, my brain worries about that happening. Probably not going to ever happen, but of course, now that it's in my mind, it's definitely going to happen the next time I travel with an expensive pen. So don't feel like your travel setup has to be your most expensive or your fanciest pens. Pick the ones you trust and the ones you enjoy using and the ones you wouldn't really panic over if something happened. And for me, that's been the real travel peace of mind. So let's talk about things to worry about or things that you probably don't really need to worry about. And I would think the number one thing here is the cabin pressure or the pressure problem on an airplane. Now, the real risk is air gaps in the ink chamber, in the ink reservoir. So a half-filled pen is more likely to burp or leak. Now, you can see on this pen that I have a partially filled reservoir. So this, whoa, this is exactly what I mean. So this, I would not, if this were just a regular pen that did not have this vac filler closing mechanism, I would not travel with this pen as is. But the thing I love about this pen is that this is a twist to close. And so when I press in and twist this close, what it's actually doing is there is a rubber stopper in here on this metal rod, and that stopper plugs up this ink reservoir so the ink does not travel into the grip section and into the feed. So it's plugged off so that as I travel with this, whatever is in the feed is what the pen will write with. Same thing with this one. This is a larger version, and this also is a vac filler that has a plunger that closes off this feed. Now this is in a medium nib, and it is a pretty juicy medium nib. So as I was saying, if you don't have time to wait on something to dry, I've actually found that if I do want to travel with this medium nib, finding a drier ink or something that is a little less lubricated, like the one I have in here right now, which is a Lennon Toolbar Masona T, it is not super lubricated. So it does dry a little. I mean, it does put ink down on the page, but it does dry a little bit faster, and it doesn't just gush out of the pen, which there's always time in my life to wait for ink to dry, but not when I'm traveling. So these two are the ones that always go with me. And I do have, let me show you a writing sample of these two pens. I've chosen these inks to go together because I like the way they look together. So in this one, I have a green ink, and in this one, I have a purpley brown ink. And when I'm on the go, this color pairing, it's enjoyable to me. It's very visually pleasing to me. And so I do often travel with these two inks in these two pens. Now, I did list on here that this one is a medium. I need to correct that. It's not a medium. This is actually a special grind that I had ground by Kirk Spear at Pen Realm, where if I'm writing on the regular side, this is a cursive italic, so it's a finer nib, but on the other side, it is a broad. So now I've got a cursive italic, I've got a broad, and I've got a medium. And so those pens do give me that line variation and the versatility that it's enough. So as I was saying, the real risk in air travel is the air gap in the reservoir, and a half-filled pen is most likely to burp or leak. Also, certain inks like shimmers or heavy sheeners can crust up in the nib if they get agitated. And as I was just saying, if I were to forget to close this shutoff valve on the vac filler, I might end up with inky fingers mid-flight. Again, ask me how I know. Things not to worry about. TSA is not going to confiscate your fountain pens. Your fountain pens are not on the TSA list of you can't fly with these things. And cartridges are fine, just toss some extras in a zip bag. So if you choose to travel with a pen that's a cartridge converter, fill it all the way to the top, or throw in some cartridges. And I always have some cartridges that are in little packages. So Muji cartridges, I have 2 of these that I may just throw in my bag if I do choose to travel with a pen that is not a vac filler. And then, I can write with this as much as I want. And then when I'm done, I can just clean this out, bring the cartridge back, and then refill it with something else at a later time. Pens in your carry-on are safe. You don't need to check them. And writing mid-flight is usually just fine. Like once you're at cruising altitude, pens behave normally unless you had a giant air bubble that caused some ink to get pushed into the feed. So, fountain pens, you don't have to worry about your fountain pen exploding on the plane. I mean, that's not true. Pens can leak if you don't prep them right, but we don't have to worry about them exploding. So travel with your pens either completely full or completely empty, and then use some cartridges if you want. And that way there's really no room for air pressure to push the ink out of the chamber and into the lid. Also, you can carry a tissue or carry your pens in a pen sleeve just in case. And it's a really simple peace of mind that can kind of take your mind off of worrying about your pen and back into enjoying your pen. And if you really want to bring ink along, consider something small, like maybe a sample vial, where you might put, your ink into a sample vial, especially one that has a rubber gasket. This one has it. It probably can't see it. But consider something that might have a rubber gasket or that's small enough where if something goes awry, it's not, you're not losing your whole bottle of ink or anything. And I also think this is really clever. Now, this is by TWSBI. This is a vac filler ink vial. What is this called? It's a VAC 20A ink bottle. And this actually, so you open it here to fill the ink in there, and you can see I've got a little bit of ink left in here, and it has 2 different sized openings. So you've got this this main lid, and then you've got this somewhat clear grippy piece, and then the red piece, and those open individually. So based on the size of the pen that you are screwing on, it will fit those pens, and then you just turn it upside down. Your pen is then docked up in here, and then when you do the vac fill, it pulls from here into your pen, and presto change, you've got a full pen, and it's very easy to use. So now you've got a really clever mechanism for filling your pens on the go if you do choose to go with something a little bit smaller and you might want to change the color mid-trip, anything like that. This does help you this does help make that a reality. So it's really perfect if you're gone for longer than a week or if you're doing a lot of writing. Okay, so let's talk about tiers of how you might travel. So first of all, tier 1 or tier 0, no pens. Tier 0, no pens. Yeah, you heard me. Sometimes the most tempered loadout is not to have a pen at all. I know, shocking, but yes, it's possible. You might not want to travel with your fountain pens at all. Tier 1, then, I would say, is more of a minimalist approach, where you've got one pen, one ink, something reliable with a fine or a medium or some kind of a modified nib, and a fast-drying ink. Done. And this one, in my scenario, this one would be the one that I would pick. Small chamber, not super large, so I can put ink into it, maybe refill with this. It has enough ink in here for me to handle my business, but it is not, it doesn't feel like I need to have much more than this, especially because I've got an interesting grind on this pen. Then more of a balanced or more realistic approach for me would be 2 pens. And for me, that would be both of my vac fillers, one steady, which is this one, and one versatile, which is this one. And combined, these give me, as I was saying, 3 different nib grinds. So did I buy these specifically because I knew I wanted to travel with them? Yes. And did I have this ground specifically because I knew that I wanted to have a little bit of variation in my writing? Absolutely. Now, Tier 3, I would say, is the prepared traveler, where you've got 2 or 3 pens plus a small ink option, maybe the TWSBI vial that I'm talking about. So if you're gone for a little longer or you're writing daily, maybe you do choose to go with a pen that is really flowy and you want to use it while you're on your trip, then yeah, this does really help make sure that you don't run out of ink on a flowy pen. It's a really great, very clever option to keep you prepped up as you're traveling. Now, I don't travel with this because I usually find that this is enough ink for the number of days that I'm gone. So I'd really be curious to know if anybody else has traveled with this, if this has misbehaved at all, but I don't think it does. When I've done some research, it's suggested that it's good. And then if you want to add to your flair, if you want to indulge a little more, that's where I would say maybe 3, 4, 5 pens, maybe a fun nib grind, maybe a shimmer ink. This is perfect more for trips where writing is part of the fun, like if you're going to a pen show or a stationery fest and you really kind of want to show off your larger kit. Absolutely a lot of fun. So here I've got a very small pocket pen that is incredibly durable and it patinas with age, and I really love this as a flair writer. This one is currently inked with a document ink, which I may need when I'm on a trip, but I would fill this all the way to the top to make sure that there was no air in here before I traveled, or I would just be prepared to deal with some of the repercussions of not making that decision, which is totally fine, really. I mean, what's the worst thing that can happen is that you've got to clean up some ink from wherever it ends up. So if you want to be very, very careful, you put it inside of a pen pouch, you maybe put it inside of a baggie that seals, so at least the damage is potentially contained. So, adding to the flair is a lot of fun. And, you can add in pretty much anything that you want to write with at this point, and that's pretty great. Now, then, of course, there is the don't be this person tier, where you have a bulging pen roll in your bag and a dozen inks, and there's really no plan to use any or all of them. So in this scenario, I would say just because you can doesn't mean you should. So, big picture, traveling with fountain pens doesn't have to be scary. It's really about preparation, not panic. So fill your pens in a smart way, keep your expectations tempered to what's realistic, and match your kit to the kind of writing you anticipate you'll actually do. Now, I've never flown to a pen show. I've only taken a train to a pen show, and honestly, I kind of think that, if you're flying to a pen show, all bets are off. And at that point, it's really every person for themselves on what's appropriate for you. But remember, whatever you buy and whatever you open and start using, you still have to get it home. I'd love to hear your stories. Have you flown with your fountain pens? Are you absolutely pro level here, not worried about any of this stuff? And if you have, I would love to hear even more pro tips, because like I said, I've been keeping it pretty tight with these two, not even really any other things. So if you have flown with fountain pens regularly, let us know. Share it for the group in the comments. Did anything leak? Or did everything just go just fine? Please drop your experiences in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this, please give it a like and subscribe to Urban Ink Spot for more pen and ink adventures, either at home or on the road. So safe travels, everyone, and safe writing. Bye.